Hitler was airborne frequently in 1942 and 1943 because of the heavy fighting on the Eastern Front. Hitler had a special squadron of transport aircraft used to move himself around his empire in safety and comfort. By 1942, Hitler's aircraft type was the Focke-Wulf 200 Condor, a large maritime aircraft bomber and civilian airliner type, specially converted for his use. Hitler's personal Condor was armed for protection against fighters. Hitler had a special armchair fitted with a parachute that he could use to escape the Condor through a special floor hatch. Two other Condors traveled with Hitler, both well appointed, one for transporting staff and guests with 14 seats and another carrying more baggage and bodyguard detail. When in flight, the Condors were protected by fighters. But with increased Allied air activity over all of Europe, flying was dangerous. In 1942, he flew to Finland for an important meeting with his ally, Marshal Mannheim. He visited the headquarters of Army Groups South on the Eastern Front twice. Although Hitler was on the ground and his pilot was flying a shuttle flight between airfields before collecting Hitler, the Condor was attacked upon by Soviet fighters just after takeoff, the plane's wings being hit by machine gun bullets, but his pilot managed to power away from danger. But the greatest danger was yet to come. On the 17th February 1943, Hitler flew from the Wolf's Lair, his Eastern Front headquarters, to Vinnitsa, refueled, and then flew to Zaporozhye, the headquarters of Army Group South. It was a disastrous time for Hitler. Stalingrad had fallen, leaving a huge hole in the German front lines, and he was determined to stop the Soviets and remove the commander of Army Group South, Field Marshal von Manstein. But Zaporozhye was a dangerous place to visit, as the Red Army was ready to capture the city. Some of the Red Army forces only 36 miles to the east. Hitler's three Condors landed at 6 a.m. on the 17th February 1943 on the biggest airfield east of the city, Zaporozhye. Hitler was greeted by large Mercedes-Benz field cars. He was then driven to Army Group South headquarters for a series of briefings and meetings. The two airfields at Zaporozhye were huge and crowded with German transport aircraft and fighter units. Hitler's meetings at the headquarters would last for 3 days, and the field marshal would not be removed. At a breakfast on the morning of the 19th February, Hitler was informed that Soviet tanks had broken through and were advancing on the highway. This would bring them close to the airfield where Hitler's aircraft were positioned. The German base commander was shocked and fighters were rushed to attack the tanks. But the bad weather hampered their efforts and they returned to the base without attacking the Soviets. With no German defenses existing between them and the field, Hitler's pilot drove into town to report the situation in person to Hitler. The pilot wanted permission to move the planes to the other similar airfields southwest of the town, considered to be safer for the time being, but Hitler refused. His meetings were finished and he would return to the airfield shortly. Arriving back at the airfield, the pilot found the base commander trying to organize the defense of the airfield, but he didn't have any anti-tank guns or even artillery. The number of the Soviet tanks was confirmed. 22 T-34 were spotted close to the airfield, moving on to an adjacent collective farm, perhaps preparing to launch an attack on the airfield itself. But shortly after the tanks were spotted, Hitler's convoy of cars also appeared. The engines on the Condors were already running when Hitler and his party boarded. As they powered away, they passed arriving transports coming into land at the airfield, carrying anti-tank guns and more infantry. It transpired later that the Soviet tanks had not attacked the airfield as they were short of fuel, allowing Hitler the time he needed to get aboard his Condor and fly to safety. The Soviets never knew just how close they had managed to get to Hitler. It was the closest Hitler would ever come to the Red Army, with the exception of April 1945, when Red Army troops were within 500 meters of Hitler's bunker when he killed himself. However, If the Soviets had known that Hitler's aircraft were on the field, it is very likely that they would have pressed their attack, regardless of losses. When the pilot told Hitler the reason why the Soviet tanks had not attacked their fuel situation, Hitler remarked, "Hitler's almost luck that had seen him avoid multiple assassination attempts held when his aircraft became a target." Later in 1943, a month after his close call with the Soviet tanks, he flew to the front again, try a stopover at Smolensk. On 13th March 1943, a bomb disguised as a baggage of 2 bottles of Cointreau was smuggled aboard Hitler's Condor for the return flight to the Wolf's Lair. The bomb time fuse activated normally 13 minutes into the flight, but the freezing conditions in the plane's unheated cargo hold prevented the explosion of the bomb. The bomb was later recovered by the army officers who had planted it, and Hitler didn't know that there was a bomb in the plane.